You are tuned into Plática de Práctica, a podcast for teachers, by teachers in visual and performing arts classrooms. Our guests will share insights, their challenges and triumphs, along with tips and tricks to navigate the contemporary creative classroom. I am your host, Renee Palomares, a resource teacher for the Albuquerque Public Schools Fine Arts Department. We are coming to you from the beautiful Albuquerque Museum, located in historic Old Town Albuquerque, New Mexico. Welcome to Plática de Práctica. Welcome to the first official episode of Plática de Práctica. We welcome none other than Superintendent of Albuquerque Public Schools, Dr. Gabriella Durán Blakey. Dr. Durán Blakey is serving in her second year as superintendent and has deep roots in APS, as you will hear in this episode. We will kick off each episode with a Dear Teacher segment, which will allow our guests to share a letter to a teacher that has impacted their life in a positive way. We'll then hear more about them and end on a pop quiz. The pop quiz segment will serve as a way to share ideas and hopefully inspire listeners and educators. We're excited to launch this podcast as we embark on the Year of the Arts in Education, which was officially proclaimed in the state of New Mexico by Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham for the 2025-2026 school year. We filmed this episode in Gallery 5 at the Albuquerque Museum, which houses the Only in Albuquerque exhibit. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully you enjoy this episode.
Dear Miss Montoya, I have carried this letter in my heart for years, and it has finally been time for me to put it into words. You were my favorite teacher, not only because you taught history when I was a middle schooler at Van Buren, and I loved history, which I eventually went on to teach myself, but because you made a lasting difference in my life that went far beyond the classroom. You cared, and I felt it every single day. You saw me not just as a student, but as a person with their own thoughts, feelings, struggles, and potential. You took time to check in and to listen to me. At a time in my life when so much felt uncertain, that meant everything to me. It was not only your kindness that stayed with me, but you challenged me. You pushed me to think harder, to write better, and to never settle for good enough. And as frustrating as that could be in the moment, I know I grew because of it. You believed that I could do more, and so I did. But most of all, you held high expectations, not just for me, but for everyone in your class. You made excellence the standard, not through any pressure, but through belief in us. And when a teacher truly believes in you, it changes the way that you see yourself. And that is what you gave me, the quiet confidence to aim higher. And looking back, you showed me what great teaching really is. It's about connection, it's about challenge, and it's about believing in your students even before they can believe in themselves. So I want to thank you, Mrs. Montoya, for your care, your challenge, and your unwavering belief in me. Your influence has stayed with me ever since, and I carry your lessons with me every day. With gratitude, Gabriella.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And we want to welcome Dr. Gabriella Blakey to the podcast. And
thank you.
I'll let you introduce yourself. Maybe you want to tell us what you do here at APS.
Thank you. I'm Gabriella Blakey, and I'm the superintendent here in APS. This is my second year, so I'm just starting my second year as superintendent. And prior to this, I was a teacher and an administrator in the district, and obviously I was a student as well.
That's awesome. And I want to go back to Ms. Montoya because we were lucky to hear a little bit about her at the APS Rising event where you had about 6,000 employees, teachers from across the district. And I think we all have a teacher, right, that really impacts us. And I feel like there's things that I've picked up from those teachers that I put into place, like in the classroom or and you mentioned like the connection and so I'm curious, like, are there habits that you feel like you formed just from like her example, like when you were teaching, and how did that come to be?
Yeah, I think so. And it's funny because, I mean, I was lucky that I had a few teachers that, had different impacts on me in positive ways. But I think with Miss Montoya, it was like that time of your life as well, like in middle school, that she was really like important. I think one of the things I picked up from her that I tried to emulate as a teacher was just like opening yourself up as a human to your students. Like I remember her talking about her family to us and asking us about ours, like asking us things beyond like U.S. history. But she was really like showing us that she was like a human that had a family, and like we were always so curious as to when she would talk about her kids and stuff. So I tried to do that with my students, like talk about my personal life in a like productive way so that they see that we're all human and we're all connected to each other.
Yeah. That's interesting because as you're talking, I'm like reflecting and thinking about my 7th grade English teacher, Mrs. Bennett. And she was like a person that I think for me was super influential in the sense that she shared so much with us, like about her life. And I remember she had this really big surgery and which caused her to walk really like a little stiff because of her spine. And she wasn't afraid to share that with us. And so if she needed help with something, we knew like, oh yeah, we know that there's a reason for it. Or we were talking a lot about music before we started recording this podcast. And she introduced me to Matchbox 20. And I just remember her playing the CD on repeat in class. And so the other day I was listening to just music and with my daughter, and I remember like coming across Matchbox 20. I was like, oh yeah, take him back. And so as you're talking, that middle school teacher just popped in my head.
Yeah, it's interesting how they like always have like an influence on you, you know, on your personality too.
And like you say, I think some of like the way she treated us as people is something that I kind of integrated into my class as well. And seeing students, right, and meeting them where they are. And yeah, I think in your new role, like, are there things that like from the classroom that you feel are applicable to what you do now? And like, how does that play into like the superintendent role?
Yeah, for sure. You know, I talk a lot about how when you go into like administration, you're still, I mean, everything is about the students and about teaching and learning. It's just that now you invest in the adults to get to the kids. And I've used this example before that when I was a principal, I had like eye-opening experience when I realized I was like trying to jump over the adults to get to the kids. And in administration, you really have to invest in the adults to get to the kids. And so a lot of that I still do as a teacher. It's just a teacher of adults. I do try to be like open about myself with people because I think it helps to connect people, and it doesn't help in a business like education that's so about relationships if I come across as really standoffish and I don't share information, you know, because we're all human. And I think it's important to have the human connection to each other. And I try to do that in my role now too, is to talk about, you know, my dogs, for example, or like my home life, because I think that that helps us to connect that we're all like humans and we're all in this together.
I love that. And I think, with that, I think when we have that human side, then we can kind of assume best intentions with that.
Right.
When it's not about like status or levels but it's like, hey, we're all fighting this fight together. And I think that was on display at the APS Rising event, where I looked around the room and like I said, I was in the bleachers in the back because it was packed. And I just remember looking out and recognizing like, we're all in this together.
Yeah, and I think we get really stuck in APS that like we talk about like the district as this big like entity. And so I try to break that down a little bit to know that like we're all the district together. Like it's all our family. And once you humanize that, I think it does like put forward the best intentions that you just talked about, because sometimes people will say, well, the district said this or that, and I'll reach out to people like, well, I represent the district like we all do. Like, how can I connect better or how can I fix that for you? Because the district is like our family, right? So we have to connect to each other to be able to break that down and realize, I mean, in 6,000 people, we were still missing like half the people. So it's a big family, right? So, and in families, there's like tension and there's things that work and things that don't. But it's really important we communicate with each other.
Yeah, I think, as you say, right, like families are complicated. And I think, if anything, for me too, I recognize like that we're all agents of change. Like we're all, again, together in this. And it was really cool. I mean, we shared a little bit about Miss Montoya before we hit record. And my supervisor was next to me and gasped because she was like, I remember her. She was my teacher too. And so, a lot of that, right? There was a lot of hugging, a lot of like, hey, I haven't seen you in a while, or hey, this, that, like a lot of reconnecting. So that felt good. And I think oftentimes we do get isolated, right? In our schools or in our four walls of wherever we're at in our classroom. So I think, it'll be great. I think just as we move forward, as we speak, to share some of those ideas that you brought to the classroom and maybe even ideas that you have for for the district in this upcoming school year.
Yeah,
So-
I hope to. And, when you were talking about like that room of 6,000 people, like within there, I have former students that were in there. And I had a teacher who reached out to me after and said that while I was talking, she got text messages from her former students who were like, you were that Miss Montoya for me. And that really meant
awesome.
a lot because it like connected that, to the teacher that got the message. She was like, wow, I really like impact somebody. And I think as teachers, we forget that there is that one student who's talking about us in a positive way of an influence. And so to know that during that time, when I was talking about a teacher that influenced me, people in the audience were texting their teachers who were also in the audience. And that really is a great sign of connection for us.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think, that's so cool. Like that aspect of, having former students that are now teachers in there. And that's really cool. I guess a question I do have for you is what goal or like what is a hope you have this year for this school year? And the reason I bring that up too is recently we received a proclamation from the governor, and it's stated that year 25-26 of the school year is going to be the arts and education year for the arts and education. So I'm just curious, like, what thoughts do you have around that, or what hopes do you have for the arts, I guess, this upcoming school year?
Yeah, I think, we're really lucky that we have invested in the arts, that all of our students are able to have, music and art in elementary school, which a lot of students in the country don't have access to that. I think people don't know that we actually provide instruments for students. And I remember talking to somebody from another district, and they were like, wait, for everybody? And I was like, yeah. And do they rent them? And I was like, no, they just can use it. How can we teach them how to play an instrument if they don't have one? Like, it's like getting a Chromebook, right? You get an instrument. And so I think part of it is just making sure that people know, like, we have to communicate that this is something that we offer to all of our students, is that we take care of the instruments for them, we give them the instruments, and that they can participate in music. And personally, for me, I was a student who was in music when I was in school in APS, and that's how I learned how to play the violin. And so to me, like personally, it's always important too. But connected to that is this year, I really want to focus on a sense of belonging for our students and for our staff. I talk about like getting to the students through the teachers, right? If our teachers don't have a sense of belonging or they feel disconnected from the district, then they're not going to have their best that they can give to their students. Yeah. And I really think that building our art and music is directly connected to a sense of belonging for our students. Yeah. So, I mean, there are plenty of times where I felt like that was a class I was excited to go to at school, or sometimes it was like during those awkward times of middle school, it was like, well, I don't have to talk to anybody, but I can like practice how, something that's important to me. And so a lot of our students just need places to express themselves. And a lot of times the arts, that is where they learn to express themselves in a very healthy way. And so I do want to encourage like the growth of our arts, because I think that it's directly connected to creating that sense of belonging for our students.
I agree. I think, and that's the cool thing about being, like, oftentimes as an art teacher, kids had a choice to be in my class. And knowing that they chose that actively, it means the world, because they could have chosen any of the other 20 classes that are available, but they chose that one. So that meant a lot. And I think it's funny because last year you actually performed for us at the beginning of the school year. And remind us what instrument you play first off.
I play the violin.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I remember seeing you on stage, and I sat down and I'm like, wait, what's going on? And there were teachers on stage, and I was like, oh, there's going to be a performance. And I had to take a photo of you, and I sent it to my wife. I was like, look who's performing for us, because that was awesome to see, right? Our superintendent actively up there with the band, and I think you even had a little solo, if I remember.
Yeah, it was really nerve-wracking because I was playing in front of other music teachers. I probably would even feel more comfortable playing around 6,000 people that don't know music than 300 that do know music. But yeah, it was And it was probably one of the like most fun things I did because I also got to practice with the teachers ahead of time.
Yeah.
And, personally for me, I think leaders always like have something that is important, whether they were a coach or they played a sport. With me, it's that I was in music. So I'm always connected to that. And people probably think it's like, why is she always like paying attention to what kind of music is in it? Like, that's how I just express myself and that's how I learn. And so I always am like really particular to music. Like even on the other day, like I wanted to make sure there was a walkout song.
I was going to say, yeah.
Then there wasn't like a song when I left. And I was like, there's no song. Nobody noticed. I was like, well, I noticed because I hear music like all the time.
Yeah.
And so music to me is just a way I express myself. And so I use it a lot in different ways because that's just the way that I learn and that's the way I express myself too.
So do you perform like actively outside of
I do.
work?
I play in a community orchestra.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where do you guys typically perform? Or
We perform 3 times a year,
Okay.
3 or 4 times a year. I think it's quarterly. We practice once a week.
Okay.
It's something I do for fun, and I like to like sit in the back and not be in charge of anything, so
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of time to practice, which is something I'll wait for like retirement time to practice more. But I do like to play, and every time I go to classes, I always want to play with the students too. So
awesome.
if any like orchestra teachers are listening, like I would love to come play with the kids, even in a concert or something.
That'd be
I
awesome.
think I could probably pick it up like to play in a concert with
Yeah.
kids without like having to be in class every day. But I just really like to do that. And the other day, last week, I was talking to a student who was giving me a tour, and she was telling me that she was in orchestra, and I was just like, I was in, she was in LBJ's orchestra. And I was like, I was in orchestra when I was in middle school too. And she kind of like lit up, like it
Yeah.
was a connection, that was something that I did growing up.
Awesome. I want to stray a little bit from music because there was one thing I wanted to ask you, and that this is if there's any visual arts inclined students. So you give out a Metro Award, and it's like Superintendent's Choice Award. And so I'm curious, like, how do you go about like choosing? Is there something it just catches your eye and you're like, that's it? Or are there like particular things? I don't know. Maybe I'm helping students out too much right here, but
yeah, if they want to win. Yeah, so there's different things. I am always like really in awe with artists, like with visual art, because I don't have that talent. But my grandfather was really into art. And so I am always very fascinated by art because I cannot do it at all. So one time I picked one. So I've picked 2. And one time it's because I'm really connected to Albuquerque. Like I'm really, I love being at the Albuquerque Museum. I have a sense of pride for Albuquerque. So if there's ever like art that showcases the city, I tend to like flock to that. And the other one is like if it shows like some sort of like personal like expression of themselves, which a lot of art does, but some of them, like I've really seen it connect to them like expressing themselves or connected to like their parent.
Okay.
Those are the ones that I've like.
That's right, because your last choice, I believe it was a portrait of the student's parent.
It was.
Who was also a teacher.
I didn't know that when I picked it, but it was like it was like the way that she expressed her mom. Like I just was so awed by it, and the way that it looked like a photograph.
I know exactly which one
I
you're
was
talking
just
about
like-
too, yeah.
So I would, if that student is like listening, I don't know if she graduated or not, but
She did.
well, if
but-
she's listening, I would buy her work because the way that her drawing looked so much like a photo was like fascinating to me. I was just like really inspired by it.
Yeah, I know exactly the piece that you're talking about. And yeah, her mom is a teacher at Albuquerque High, so hopefully her mom's listening to the
hopefully her
podcast.
mom's listening and she's gonna
Yeah.
show me more of the work. I was just like the way that she expressed like her mom. I just like was really connected to that.
That's awesome. And I love that you brought out the whole Albuquerque like inspiration. That's kind of why I chose this location. So we're like sitting on top of a map of Albuquerque right now here at Albuquerque Museum. So we're in technically Gallery 5, and it's the only an Albuquerque exhibit. And I don't know, when I was like, that we were going to interview you, we have like a list of potential locations, but something called me to here. I'm like, because technically, I mean, you're the superintendent of the city. Like, I don't know, I thought it would be a good representation of just,
Yeah,
everything.
I love it. Yeah. I was like, I'm sitting on Albuquerque, but it's, I take a lot of pride in being from Albuquerque, and I think we have to do a better job as adults talking positively about it, and talking positively about our city, about our district. Just the other day, I was talking to a high school student. He was like, I know, like, other people say bad things about APS, but I really like my school. And just him saying that, like, made it, like, hurt, because, 16-year-old shouldn't have to defend his school by saying how proud he was to speak up for it. I'm like, no, adults need to speak highly of their school, of their city, because it's impacting the way the kids see themselves.
And I think that's the point of this podcast too, is to share those stories. Oftentimes we kind of like hear a lot of like the bigger like national media that, New Mexico's last for this and that, and if anything, I want to highlight voices, right, and ideas and stories of people that are in the classroom or that oversee classrooms, whatever, right? Because there's so many like day-to-day wins, like hour-to-hour wins that the community doesn't always see. And I think that's, again, the point of this, is to really showcase that, because there's some amazing teaching happening in Albuquerque. There's some amazing kids doing amazing work, and especially in the arts. I mean, obviously we're biased because we're part of the fine arts department, but we've seen it day in and day out. And in my role now with the fine arts department, I'm able to see it not just in my classroom or my school, but across the district. And so we appreciate that you're here and representing the whole district. And we're technically sitting just north of I-40, I think. And
that's what it looks like.
And the big I over here. So we do have a little segment that we're going to do with all our guests, and we call it the pop quiz segment. And it's a few questions, and it's going to be the same questions for every guest. So I wanted to see if we could ask you those questions, and then we'll continue talking. All right. So our first pop quiz question was, where do you find inspiration, motivation, or the drive to be an educator?
I mean, a combination of things, but, we were talking about music earlier, and I do, like, in the morning, like, listen to music that will, like, inspire me to do the work. Sometimes it's, like, music that you wouldn't play for other people, but I do, like, get inspired by music.
Okay.
And also just, like, being around the city and seeing kids. Like, every time I'm in a classroom or I see kids, I'm always inspired, like, to make things better for them. And I know we're not perfect and we can do better, but I really believe that we can. So those are kind of like the combination of where I get my inspiration.
You're going to have to give us your top song on your playlist then.
I don't think so. Maybe.
Give us the genre at least, so that way we know.
It is by Eminem.
Okay. Enough said. Let's see. So question number 2 was, what is a tip or trick you can share with educators that will help them with students of special populations? So such as English learners or students with IEPs, like what's something that you, from your experience in the classroom, you're like, this could help?
I think, so I did teach English language learners that were new to the country. And one of the main things is really personalizing education for kids. I think that that's really important, that you bring their culture into the school. Like, I remember when I was making like our classroom norms, and I had each student like write it in their like language and draw a picture of it and like own it. And it made like all the difference in making like a welcoming classroom, because I always included like their culture, their language, their art into the classroom. And I think that creating that visual space in a classroom for students to feel connected as English language learners is really important.
Okay. Awesome. My next question was, what has been a highlight project or activity that you have done with students that you're most proud of?
I'm most proud of when I was teaching high school at Highland High School, and we did a decades project. And so we did like group work where each group had a different decade. And they had to like look into it. And I had the different elements of the decade that they had to look into, and then they presented it back to their class. But it was a really fun project, but I really liked that students like learned teamwork through it. They learned that every decade in history has highs and lows. And so they had to also like come up with what we learned from that decade that has helped us and what we've learned that may have not helped us, what changed us because of that decade. And in doing that, like they realized like every decade has positives and negatives. And we get better because of it. And so I always, if I were to go back to teaching, I would still do that project because the kids really took a lot away from it.
That's awesome. My next question was, who has been a student that has made you a better educator?
So I had a student when I was teaching at Highland who made me a better educator for sure. He was struggling with like gang involvement. And I just saw that he was like super smart, and I really pushed him. Like I challenged myself to push him to come to my class to like show how smart he was. And we had challenging times where he would get in trouble, and I kept working with him, and he ended up like having I used to post like the grades without their names on it, and he had like a higher grade than the valedictorian. And I just remember how proud he was of it, and I was like, I knew you could do it, but I wouldn't let him like leave class if he didn't do his work. I showed him how like the Declaration of Independence could be like used as a gang. Like I was trying to connect to him. But he always has influenced me. And when I went to go teach later at the charter school I was working at too, he would like come by and see me. And I still, now his kids are in school. And so I still kind of keep up with him because he really like impacted me as just not giving up on kids and really believing in them.
That's awesome. That goes back to like the personalization. You mentioned the gang kind of culture and whatnot. And oftentimes, like I've told people before, like there's positives in that as well, where there's connection, especially for males.
Yeah.
And like, and being vulnerable. And I remember I've told a couple of my colleagues at Fine Arts that growing up, like I had like this admiration of cholos because they were always clean and they were like, everything was ironed and crisp. And I mean, my mom would never let me dress like that,
right.
But I'm just like, oh my goodness, like these guys are interesting. Like they look well put together. And on one end they were, but then on the other end they were doing other things.
Yeah. But honestly, like I really have a heart for working with the students. And he was like one of the best he had really good leadership skills, and you could tell because if he can lead like a gang, I'm like, what if you use that for positive and like getting able to pull those like assets out that he is a really good leader. Now, how can we use your leadership skills in a positive way? I think really was important.
It's just redirecting the energy.
Exactly. But like their skills are there.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So our last question for the pop quiz segment is, what advice would you give your younger teacher self?
I think my younger teacher self, I would probably give them, I guess I would give them advice to just not try to get everything perfect. I was like, when I was teaching, I would get really down, like because I missed something with the student or I didn't like get as far as I wanted to. And I feel like that kind of held me back to try to be like perfect. Yeah. And then as I got older, I let go of some of that perfection just to like make every day better than the day before and make every student like leave stronger than they were when they entered the classroom. And I got to like a healthier place than like really, I wish my younger self like kind of saw things in that way.
Yeah. I'm locked onto what you said about personalizing education because I feel like that would also help in the sense that you have the inspiration there, your students, right? Like you don't have to take everything on like from like your own mind and I have to create this and that. It's like, no, you're a community. You can use your students to develop and come up with rubrics together or like, and I think that's super important. I think for me as a younger teacher, like I would have tapped into more of that personalization and not think that
Exactly.
again, like that I have to do it all by myself.
Yeah, because the kids have the answers, like we lead them to it, but it's kind of that adage of like the students should be working harder than the teachers. And I wish when I was younger, I've like really stepped back to see like, are the kids doing the work, or am I like trying to like do the work for them?
And on top of that, like I think you have one of your groups that you meet with that is student centric, right? It's student focused, and I think not only working equally with the teacher, but also having a voice in like what's happening, because I think that oftentimes we kind of make decisions as adults, and then it's like the kids just kind of, because that's how adults, I mean, culturally, like for me, it was like the adults are always right. You just go along with it, and then and just yes sir, no ma'am, like. And so it's really awesome that you have those groups that you're meeting with. And I think, again, having the student voice is important, because then you hear stories of like being proud of their school or whatever the case may be.
Yeah,
so,
they're a great group.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's the end of the pop quiz segment. Now we're gonna be left trying to figure out which Eminem song you were talking about. So I don't know if
I won't sing it.
We can probably find it. We were just talking about the rights to music and stuff a little while ago, but we'll have to find an edited version.
I do. Well, and right now, like I do use Pitbull as a walkout song because I use the like I Believe That We Can Win song. And it doesn't have any bad words, but it also, like, so at the beginning of the song, it says, like, what spreads more than a virus is fear. And I just think that that's really important, because I think sometimes as adults, we hold ourselves back of, like, trying things because of fear. And I think that prohibits us from getting further in education, too. So that is, like, the song that I walked out to. And I walk out anytime that people let me play a walkout song, because I do think it shows that we have like a belief in ourselves, and I think that we have to let go of letting fear drive us. So.
I'm curious then on that topic of fear, like what is something that you think is holding us back, either just like as a collective, like what do we fear as a district, or even like as teachers? What's something that you think you would like break?
I think that we're have a fear of failure, which I think we have to push through. I think a lot of educators were really good students and like are scared to like not get that A if you don't like follow the directions. And so I think that a lot of it is like a fear of failure. And so we use kind of this like, oh, we're, last to kind of justify like not having to like push ourselves out of the fear part. Yeah. So I think that I think that we have a fear of failure, of like.
That's interesting.
And I kind of feel like if you don't fail, then you don't move forward. Think about it like looping back to being a musician. If I like just stopped because it was too hard, or I failed, then I wouldn't have continued playing, So I think in sports and music and art, like you do learn from failure that it actually makes you stronger in the end.
Yeah, I just had that conversation with my daughter last week, because we're actually learning how to play Pokemon, the actual card game, and she lost and she was upset. Yeah. And I told her, this is an opportunity for you to figure out strategy, like what do you want to do next? So we had that conversation about like oftentimes losing and failure are really opportunities to grow and to try different things, or whatever the case may be. So.
I think that we're like actually kind of scared to tell kids that sometimes. Like we're worried because kids do have, a lot going on in their lives. And if you tell them like that they're getting something wrong, that will make them like discouraged. And I think in setting up that culture, it's actually hurting them more than like pushing them. So like I'll loop back to Mrs. Montoya. If she was like, well, I know Gabriella's struggling with this and that, so I'm not going to have her turn in her work, like that would have been worse for me. But she kept her high expectations even when she knew I was struggling, because letting go would have been worse, right? So and I think about the student I talked about. If I had just been like, well, I know he has a lot going on, he has this gang stuff going, I'm just gonna like not push him, he wouldn't have gotten as far as he did.
Yeah.
So we have to kind of not be so scared to push kids, because I think that allowing them to lose sometimes, telling them like that they got the answer wrong and showing them how to get it right is actually what's going to make them grow. And I think that sometimes we have a fear of like upsetting them.
Yeah. Well, we want to thank you so much
Thank you.
for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. And we look forward to the school year. And here we are recording on the 11th of August. So it's still early in the year, and
Yes.
there's a lot of year to go,
Yes,
go
there's
on.
a lot left.
So thank you so much
Thank
for all
you.
the work that you do and your vision and your guidance for the district. And again, we look forward to seeing what happens this school year. It should be fun.
Thank you. It should be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Plática de Práctica. Plática de Práctica is brought to you by the support of Albuquerque Public Schools Fine Arts Department, APS Education Foundation, and Albuquerque Museum. Plática de Práctica is recorded, mixed, and edited by Patrick Bear. It is produced and hosted by me, Renee Palomares. We appreciate you listening. Take care. Until next time.